folks. Today, I want to talk about three tools that you can use to help strike down the lies of the New World Order. And I've been thinking about this video for a while. I've actually recorded many iterations of it. And sometimes when I shoot videos, I want to convey certain things, and then I realize, I didn't say that afterwards. And I've tried to shoot this video. I think I've done probably 10 takes of it, which sounds crazy, but I'm trying to just be more direct in the way I speak. And sometimes if I feel like I'm trying to force something and I didn't get it right, I put it away for a while. And so I've sat on this one for a couple weeks now, and again, tried many iterations of it. So we're going to just try to do it all in one take today. And I was actually re-inspired to do this video. I took a bit of time off it. I was re-inspired to do it when I saw that footage of alleged footage of India allegedly landing on the moon. I don't know if you guys seen this, but it's worth checking out. And it's so bad. It's shocking to me that they're trying to tell you that this is real. The footage doesn't even look as good as the original George Lucas Star Wars from the 70s. It doesn't even look that good. So a country that doesn't even have basic plumbing is landing on the moon. It's insane. And so what I want to get at in this video is kind of talk about truth and why it's so important, and then how you can really easily, with your own eyes, identify what's true or not. Because we're living in a world of lies it's so thick and so everywhere that people are being shown things that are just obvious lies and obvious bullshit, and the media and the government is asking you to believe it. But I think really what's going on here is we're seeing gaslighting now at a quantum level. It is beyond anything we've seen before. And maybe that gaslighting in a way is some kind of notice. It's some kind of notice that they're giving you that if you believe this BS, it's on you. And part of why I want to do this video today and talk about these three things is that because we're living in such a world of lies, truth is more important than ever. And truth is really an incredible thing if you think about it. The world as we know it, you can have no success in life without truth. Case in point, I'm a guy who really has dealt with applied science for my entire career, as you've known me on YouTube, making videos as a farmer. I really use applied science. Case in point, anything that is done in agriculture that works has to be true. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And you can't build off it if it isn't true. Another example is building a home. Applied science and truths need to exist in order to build a foundation and then frame a house. All of civilization as we know it is built on truth, because without truth, nothing can be done successfully. And in a way, that's kind of where we are right now, is we're in this crazy world where there's so many lies that we're just seeing a lot of things fall apart in society, cultural, economic. Things are just falling apart because we have such a lack of truth in today's world. I mean, if you think about, just look at old images of, I saw this, I sometimes look at vintage photography. My wife's is a professional photographer, was for many years. And I really have an appreciation for photography, especially old photography. But you look at just old photography of some of the cities in the United States in, say, the 1950s, and you look at the architecture, and you look at the way people are dressed, and it looks nothing like it does today. And so we're supposed to be this great society with all this great technology. Yet look at the streets of San Francisco. Look at the streets of Vancouver. Look at how shitty the architecture is. Just look at the overall presentation of the society or the culture as a whole compared to in the 1950s to now. There's no comparison. We're in an era of garbage, an era of lies. And so with that, truth is just so important. And what is true? How can you actually decide for yourself what's true? Because you'll hear the media relentlessly and the governments of the world and the biggest institutions of the world telling you things like white supremacy is the greatest threat to America. That's Joe Biden saying right now that white supremacy is the greatest threat to the American way. So you're hearing that, but then you go out on the street, it doesn't matter what state you live in, even if you live in a place like Georgia or Alabama, the places that everybody say are the most racist. And there's no KKK on the street. There's no crosses burning. There's no overall racism, but they're telling you that it's racist. Then you hear the climate activists, the big politicians saying that climate change is the greatest existential threat to humankind. And then they make this claim, and this is the biggest theme of my last video, that carbon dioxide is directly causing ocean sea level rise and the warming of the temperature. Yet they present no real solid evidence for that because it's a very difficult thing to prove. And so what I want to do in this video is give you 3 things that you can use in conversations to help get to the heart of the matter. And you don't need to sit there and play this game where you throw books of facts at people. Well, have you read this? Have you read that? No, well, then you're it, blah, blah, blah. None of that matters. Because these things I'm going to talk about are useful, logical tools that you can employ when you're having conversations with people. And we're about to get into that time of year where families get together, right? We've got Thanksgiving coming soon, and then of course we've got Christmas and the whole winter holiday, especially for North American society, is typically a time where people slow down and they have conversations. They also might be trying to push another pandemic, though I kind of think because the news got out early on that one, that I think we got the gun on that one, and I don't think it'll work. I know for myself, I'll be resisting every single request that's made of me to wear a mask. Of course, we don't take shots in our family, but I will not be complying in any way. And my strategy, if they try to bring back masks in stores, is I will not wear a mask in any way. And I'm going to go around, and I'm prepared to go into stores with cash and pay in cash, because in Canada we have in the Bills of Exchange Act, there's an article in there that talks about how you can't resist legal tender. So if I walk into a store and they're saying they're not going to take my money because they can maybe not pass me the card reader to take the transaction, I can pay in cash and just walk out, and I'm in the right legally. So they can't deny you service legally. And what my strategy is going to be this time around is I will make them call the police on me. And so if they're threatening to bring in security, yeah, have it. I'm just going to keep shopping, and I'll go and I'll pay in cash, and I'll leave it on the table, and I'll take my stuff and walk away. But I'm going to encourage people, and I'm just telling you what I'm going to do, and you can decide what you want to do, because everybody might have a different context and a different threshold to how far you want to take these things. But my strategy this time around is going to be, you call the cops on me, bring the cops here. I want them to write a fine for me, charge me, add as many zeros to that fine as you want, and I want your name, I want everybody's name on the record. So I'm prepared to go to court for any of this stuff, because I know for the most part they're going to throw them out. You take a guy like Chris Sky, for example, in Canada, who's had something around 30 charges for all the scamdemic nonsense that happened and 0 convictions. I think he's actually set a world record for charges versus convictions. So it really shows you an example there of how this whole scam was really on shaky ground, because it wasn't based on truth. It was all based on a lie. And that's like all the stuff that the globalists push. And so again, what I want to get at in this video is give you these 3 tools you can use to, in conversations with your family and loved ones and your friends, that you can ask some simple questions and really tear through the propaganda and the BS. Because the propaganda machine, whether you're talking about these so-called climate scientists who all get big funding from banks and corporations that have all these factoids and all these charts and all these things, but when you really get down to the heart of a lot of these things, you can easily observe that they're BS. And I mentioned that India moon landing, it's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. They're not even comparable to Hollywood from the 1960s. It gets that much of a joke. And I think I was kind of inspired again to make this video because it seems to be a sort of a marker of where we're at. Is we're being gaslit on a quantum level now. And you can really start to use logic and your own eyes to see through all of it. Okay, so let's get into it. The first thing, so there's 3 things I'm going to go through. I'll summarize them real quick here. The first thing is, can you observe it and measure it and really identify with your own eyes that it's real? That's the first one. The second one is, what do you expect the government to do about it? And the third one is, what does a positive outcome look like? So let's take all these things and I'll throw in all kinds of propaganda that the New World Order throws at us. And you can spin any of these 3 tools into your assessment of that said thing. So, number 1, can you observe it and measure it and really identify through your own experience that it's real? So climate change is a really good one because, I mean, I could go on about it for a long time and I'll try not to because I did that in my last video. But you can observe climate change with your own eyes, okay? But there's other elements of the sort of pseudoscience climate change that you can't. So a way you can observe climate change with your own eyes is look at a large area that's been deforested, okay? History shows this. You can see it with your own eyes. If you understand anything about the hydraulic cycle and the way that water accumulates in the sky and rains, there's a reason why temperate areas are temperate. Temperate areas such as the southeast quadrant of the United States, think about a state like North Carolina, Georgia, Kentucky, Pennsylvania. These are all temperate climates. And part of the reason they're temperate is because they have a lot of green. They have a lot of trees. And in the hydraulic cycle, you can witness rain come down from the sky, and it rains and it gets warm, and you can witness this even in a place like Quebec and Ontario in Canada, and all those trees perspire and they breathe and clouds accumulate above them because there's so much perspiration and breathing of the forest, and that helps it rain more. You never see rain. You don't see rain very often in places like Montana or the whole western side of the United States, or in these desert climates. They've all been deforested. And so you can witness, you go to a place like Brazil where you can see large scale clear cutting of the rainforest. Now when it starts to rain in those areas, it washes away the soil. It will completely change the climate there. Just like the main river delta, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in Egypt. That used to be, even read about it in the Bible, it used to be green and lush. Now it's a desert. There's no question that humans can change the climate. If you do massive deforestation and you change the geography of a large area, it will in turn eventually change the climate of that area. It's very easy to observe. But what is not easy to observe is, or I would say is impossible to observe, is that carbon changes the climate. Not only because it's very nebulous and there's not a single thing you can point to, but it's a claim they make. And you can't even back up that claim by any localized experiments, as like I've mentioned before. If I pump carbon dioxide into my greenhouse, it doesn't make it warmer. It just makes the plants grow. And I would encourage you to check out a guy named Dr. Tim Ball. I mentioned in the last video, but he has a 2-hour lecture, which I found, which some of you guys found. I'll put it in the show notes here, this video, and go check it out. And he goes through all this stuff and just completely shows you how it's complete nonsense, and none of it's backed up by actual hard science. It's all this speculative stuff. And so, again, on the climate change thing, they say climate is the greatest existential threat to you, climate change, and nobody's denying that climate's change. I'm not even denying that humans can't change the climate. What I'm denying is, number one, there's no evidence that carbon is warming the planet, let alone rising the sea level, bringing the sea levels up. And two, what do you expect the government to do about it? So pick a government program. Okay, let's go back on racism. If racism is the greatest existential threat, what government program that tackles racism has ended racism? Because if you were to only listen to the media right now, you would assume that we're in a complete Nazi regime where there's racism coming at you from every angle. But there was a black president in the United States that a majority of whites elected. And now it's more racist. So again, it's one of these things where you go, well, I can't observe it. And then two, what do you expect the government to do about it? Well, obviously whatever they've done hasn't worked. And then three, what does success look like at the end? If we're talking about racism, is success measured by there being no racism? Because is that even possible? I'm of the thinking that everybody's racist. Therefore, nobody's racist. Because people just observe patterns. And so the sort of modern day leftist communist liberals want to tell you that you're a white supremacist if you come to a conclusion of there's a certain group of people that sit at the highest positions of all big banks. There's a certain group of people. So, and it's a fact, it's a bona fide fact, and all you have to do is go and look at the last names of all these individuals. But is that a racist statement, or is it just an observation of a fact? You can say the same thing about violent crime in the United States. There's a certain group that commits the lion's share of crimes adjusted for the population. Is that racist to say a fact? Well, the modern day leftist liberal communists would have you believe that. But I would say that it's just pattern recognition. Just like how if I lived in the savannah of Africa and my biggest natural threat were lions and tigers, and I'd seen people been attacked by lions before, and so if I see a lion coming at me, should I ignore all of my pattern recognition and past and just say, oh, maybe he just wants to have a chat? No, you don't, because you're not stupid. But that's pattern recognition. And again, going to all these things, what does success look like at the end? None of them can be solved by government, and none of them have an end. So whether we're talking about the war on drugs, where's the end? And has government been successful at it? No. Government has been terrible at it, because if the war on drugs was to eliminate all drugs, well, right now, I think it's fairly easy to make the case that the drug epidemic is worse than it's ever been, with fentanyl and the opioids that have been coming in en masse. The war on terror, it's an invisible enemy. All these things, it's an invisible enemy in a war you can never win. The war on terror started, it started with Iraq, and then it was Afghanistan, and then they knocked out all these other countries that you can listen to these guys brag about on the Council on Foreign Relations, by the way. They brag about this stuff. But it never ends, right? And it's an invisible enemy, because it's not the war on Iraq, Because if it's the war on Iraq, there could be sort of a definable end to that. But it's a war on terror. That way it's amorphous. That way it's something outside of an individual thing or problem that can be solved. It's the same with all this stuff. So even transgender issues. Trans kids, protect trans kids. Well, again, going to the point of it's an invisible enemy in a war you can never win, is there's no such thing as trans kids. That doesn't exist. There's no such thing as trans. There's no such thing as gender. Gender, before all the trans issues and queer stuff came up, gender came from language. So if you spoke one of the Latin languages, you had masculine and feminine ways of descriptive words. So there's, I think in French, chair is feminine, chaise or whatever it is. And I don't want to get caught up in that because I don't speak French very well, but you know that if you speak in those languages, they're gendered. And so that's where gender was originally part of, was language. And then they want you to believe that you have a gender. And so they started putting that on our driver's licenses and our birth certificates, where it used to say sex. Now it says gender. So this one's been a real slow roll. But there's no such thing as gender. Even the social justice warriors will tell you that gender is a social construct. Meanwhile, there's doctors and scientists out there performing transgender surgeries. But if gender is a social construct and biological sex is the only thing that we can actually observe in the real world, why are they mutilating children? Well, it's because they're a bunch of satanic, Luciferian cultists, and I guess that's their thing, is mutilating children. But the whole transgender thing, it doesn't exist. Can you verify it? Can you measure it? No, because if gender just comes from language, the only thing you can measure is biological sex. But they're not fighting for that. They're not fighting for biological sex. They're fighting for transgender issues. So again, it's an invisible enemy and a war you can never win, because number one, how do you measure it? Can you observe it? No, because it doesn't exist. Two, what do you expect the government to do about it? Well, it's easy to observe that there is an onslaught of government programs around the world dedicated to these issues, and there only seems to be, according to them, more hatred of them, right? So the more they do, the worse it gets. And then thirdly, what does success look like at the end? Does success look like everybody accepting transgenderism? But that's never going to happen, because transgenderism and queer issues and all this stuff is based on a lie. It doesn't exist in the real world. So people are always going to reject it because it's based on a lie. Whereas when you take hard truth, there are biological men and biological women, and sure, there's anomalies in nature in some rare circumstances, but it's irrelevant. Is you take these truths and people understand them at an intuitive level because they experience them. But then you have some bona fide peer-reviewed expert telling you that there isn't such thing as biological sex. And I've heard some of these people say this. And it's never going to fly. And so how do you measure success? How do you measure success with a lie? You'll never be successful, because people will always see the lie. And so go down the litany of issues, or just trying to think of some that are more, nuclear war, the threat of nuclear war. They're telling you that nuclear war is imminent. They're telling you that these countries have these nuclear weapons, and that mutually assured destruction is the thing that keeps us all safe. Yet, I have never seen them. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that they don't exist, though. If you do watch some of the early footage from the US when they were doing those nuclear tests, it's pretty funny. They're obviously models, and there's even footage you can see where the camera's backed out and you can see the stage and all this stuff. And so I'll leave that rabbit hole for you to go down. But they're telling you that this is a really big existential threat, though there's nothing you can observe in your day-to-day life to prove that it's real. And then again, what do you expect the government to do about it? Well, the governments have been fear-mongering around the world about nuclear programs for a long time, and it doesn't really seem to make anything better. And then again, what does success look like? Does success mean that everybody has nuclear weapons, or nobody has nuclear weapons, or just the few big players have nuclear weapons? It's completely inconsistent. And so again, with these three things, what I'm trying to get at the heart at here is that if it doesn't pass the test of these three things, it is not worthy of your attention. It is not worthy of being concerned about. And that's pretty much all the issues that they're throwing at us today can be dismantled with these three tools. Can you observe it and measure it? Can you identify it as real? Is there a way to test locally to see if it's real and it can affect you? 2, what the hell do you expect the government to do about it? Because pick a program, folks. Governments are, every time the government gets involved in a program, that thing gets worse. Case in point, the war on terror, the war on drugs, the war on racism. We have more of all those things now than ever that the government's got involved. And then thirdly, what does success look like? Where does it end? You know, one thing you'll find that's a really good juxtaposition between the free market and government is that in the free market, if you want to do something, say you want to build a bridge, you build a bridge and then that program's done. In government, they run a program and it never ends because there's never a successful part. So let's say the war on poverty. So the government wants to get together to create social programs, social security, what have you, to solve poverty. Well, at least I'm observing in North America and the Western world in general, it seems now like there's more poverty than ever. It seems like the divide between the rich and the poor is the greatest it's ever been. Meanwhile, we live in this what they call a socialist state. So Canada is considered socialist. It's state capitalism / socialist, which really is the same as most Western countries now. But now there's more poverty than ever. There's drug addicts dying on the street in every town, even small towns, even around here. There's people on the street that are dying of fentanyl. So there's no end to it. And this is ultimately the biggest litmus test, is asking these three questions. And when you're getting together with your family and friends over Thanksgiving and the holidays this year, bring these things into the conversation, because it's not so much about throwing factoids about this, that, and the other. Oh, have you read this? Have you seen that? Blah, 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 blah. That goes on forever. It's asking these questions to appeal to somebody's logical mind, because all of these things, pick your issue. There's so many of these issues: war on drugs, war on terror, trans rights, white supremacy, climate change, the poverty. Every issue that the government tackles fails, as in the problem gets worse, and 2, it never ends. Because anytime the government does something, they don't say, because in the free market, if you said, we need to figure out a way so that people stop dying of fentanyl on the streets. In the free market, you might throw some money at that problem, and if it didn't work, you wouldn't keep spending the money because the money's limited. Whereas with government, where you can print money, they can go at a problem, have it completely fail, and then the politicians just say it needs more money. So thus it goes on forever. So it's a perpetual cycle. It's a perpetual boondoggle. It'll go on forever. And so that's really the crux of what I wanted to talk about in this video. And I'm glad this one wasn't an hour long. But yeah, when you're getting together with your family and friends and loved ones, ask these questions. Can you verify it with your own eyes? Can you observe it? Can you measure it in any way? 2, what do you expect the government to do about it? And has the government been successful at it thus far? Is this problem still here, according to them? And then thirdly, what does success look like at the end? Is there an end? And I would propose that pretty much everything that they propose, there is no end. That's a big marker of a boondoggle, folks. If it's an invisible enemy and a war you can never win, that's a boondoggle. That's a scam. That's another way of tricking you to comply with the latest thing that they've got. I'll tell you what, if they try the mask thing again, I know a lot of people who are going to be rejecting it. And I actually feel great. I know a lot of people are burnt out. I've talked to some folks in my area that are just going, oh, again, really? I got nothing left. I'm regenerated, folks. I'm rejuvenated. I'm ready to go back at this and resist it every time. You know, I have to admit, there were times, my wife never wore a mask once. There were times where I had to. I didn't wear a mask, but I would put a scarf on my face or something because I simply had to get in that store and buy that stuff. But I only did that a handful of times, and like I said, you know, I was under construction, so I had to get the stuff. And at that time, I didn't really feel that there was another option. Now, having witnessed all of these charges thrown out, all these fines, all these tickets, and basically all of them being thrown out. There's some examples of people like Arthur Pawlowski, the Calgary preacher, who I think he's still embroiled in some stuff, but for the most part, they threw all this stuff out because it has no legal standing. It has no standing in truth. And if we want to build a homestead or a small town or a community or a civilization in general, you need to have a foundation of truth. Without truth, society and progress goes nowhere. And I would make the case that that's exactly where we are. Case in point, this India moon landing is an absolute, it's like a Monty Python skit. It's so ridiculous, but that's where we're at. And so we need tools to cut through the BS, cut through the lies of the New World Order. I'm going to leave it there, folks. If you guys liked this video, please smash the like, share the videos with your friends, subscribe to my channel here on YouTube if you aren't already. Follow me on Twitter. I'm sharing this stuff on Twitter as well, at OffGridStone. And check out some of the products and services that I offer. I don't monetize these videos, and the reason for that is that I don't care about YouTube's woke corporations advertising on my channel, so I actually intentionally demonetize these videos on YouTube, and because they'd probably get demonetized anyways. And my company makes a lot of great stuff. Freedom Farmers is our main platform. We can teach you how to get on the land and how to do a litany of things on the land, whether it's starting a market garden, a microgreens operation, doing any kind of regenerative agriculture with animals. We've built courses for all this stuff because we know it's valuable and we know it can help you, and it can help you crush it in this new paradigm. Because I think if you can have more ways to make money, especially from your land, you're not going to be forced into these cities complying with a bunch of BS rules. So if you want to support my work, that's the best place to do it. freedomfarmers.com. All right, folks, see you in the next one. And again, folks, if you want to learn more about any of the products or services that we offer, head over to freedomfarmers.com. We can teach you how to get on the land and do almost everything from there.